Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The preparations for the upcoming unification match in the bantamweight division. Reigning WBO 2 division champion Dina Thorslund appears to have enlisted the aid of Ebony Jones. Interesting sparring partner for Yuli Hang Luna as they fight. Nothing alike, not really. Ebony's an athletic, herky-jerky fighter, mid-range to inside fighter, fights out of a very wide stance. Perhaps Dina enlisted the aid of Ebony Jones because Ebony is a naturally bigger woman that campaigns up there at featherweight. Decent-sized puncher. Perhaps she enlisted her aid to prepare herself to face the biggest puncher she's ever faced. Both Dina Thorslund and Yuli Hang Luna are the two most experienced champions in the women's featherweight division, of which there are four. There's Ebony Bridges holding the IBF, Nina Hughes holding the WBA. And then there's these two. Among the sparring partners that Dina Thorslund hired to prepare her for this unification match is Matchroom's own Sky Nicholson. A very good parallel for what she'll face in Yuli Hang Luna, as Sky Nicholson is a defensively minded fighter, the same as Yuli Hang. Few slight differences aside, that Sky Nicholson really isn't the puncher that Yuli Hang Luna is. Nowhere near as experienced, and she fights out of the southpaw stance, whereas Yuli Hang Luna, she's an orthodox fighter. As stated, there are a few slight differences, but there are also similarities. Yuli Hang Luna, like Sky Nicholson, is prone to using the ring and using her feet. Lateral movement to set traps, set up counters, straight punches from the outside, staying behind the jab, creating space. So I see the logic. Dina Thorslund preparing herself as the smaller, stumpier fighter of the two to cut the ring off, close the distance, and get off punches mid-range to inside. What is the most difficult fight of her career, at least on paper. What looks to be the only unification match the bantamweight division will deliver this year. I half expected to see another unification match in Ebony Bridges versus Nina Hughes on the Matchroom side of things. Because the summer is all but over, we're halfway through August, and because Ebony Bridges doesn't have a fight date yet, you get the sense that she'll probably only fight once this year, then perhaps unify at some point next year, though Nina Hughes has been very adamant. Very vocal. She wants that fight now. She wants that fight sooner rather than later. As it stands, it looks like Thorslund versus Luna is the only unification match we'll see at 118 this year. Ebony Bridges will likely take a tune-up fight since she's coming off that injury and the subsequent surgery that followed. Maybe Nina Hughes squeezes in a fight, a voluntary title defense, or a mandatory if one is called. Dina Thorslund and Yuli Hang Luna will settle up with each other next month. And it's a tough fight to edge, it's a tough fight to call, because both Yuli Hang Luna and Dina Thorslund are the two most experienced fighters, the two most experienced champions at the weight. Dina Thorslund will have home field advantage. This fight is going down in her neck of the woods. So in the event of close rounds, I anticipate that she will get optimal consideration, as is customary in the sport of boxing, whether you like it or not. Home field advantage is a real thing. Even with home field advantage, it's an uphill battle for Dina Thorslund, who's a very bouncy fighter, fighting on the balls of her feet, in and out, managing the distance. It's not often she's in there with a fighter that's noticeably taller and longer than she is. Some experience with a moving target in Argentina's own Deborah Ana E. Lopez. She's a mover. Back foot, defensively minded fighter, though her counters are not as authoritative. Her counters ain't as sweet as Yuli Hang Luna's counters, who's not just a defensively minded fighter, she's a strong puncher. Very strong. Nevertheless, the fight with Deborah Ana E. Lopez, a moving target, and what sparring she's getting, what work she's getting from Sky Nicholson, yet another moving target, lateral movement, stick and move kind of fighter, it all lends itself to preparing her for Yuli Hang Luna, who is a more complete fighter than those two aforementioned fighters. She is. Set to go down early next month in Denmark. We'll talk more about the fight as the fight date approaches. Men's super featherweight news, the viewing figures are in for this past weekend's WBO title fight between Emmanuel Navarrete and Oscar Valdez. It peaked at 884,000 viewers and averaged 800,000. That's just a few 100,000 short of 1 million. Very good viewing figures for a super featherweight title fight that you didn't have to break the bank to make. More boxing fans than usual tuned in Saturday night for a highly anticipated battle between Mexican warriors. Nielsen Media and TV Research released figures Tuesday that indicated a peak audience of 884,000 who watched ESPN's telecast of the Emmanuel Navarrete versus Oscar Valdez main event from the Desert Diamond Arena in Glendale, Arizona. The average audience for a 12-round, 130-pound title bout Navarrete won unanimously was 808,000, according to Nielsen Media and TV Research. This card went head-to-head with a PBC show that was happening at the same time on Showtime, the Emmanuel Rodriguez IBF title fight for the vacant IBF title. Emmanuel won it, but most boxing fans that night, at least according to these numbers, tuned into the Navarrete fight instead of the Rodriguez fight. The Rodriguez fight that peaked at around 192,000 viewers, 192,000 homes, compared to the 884,000 that were watching the top-ranked card. 4 times as many homes, 4 times as many boxing fans were watching the top-ranked show as opposed to the ESPN show. Important particulars. The numbers that Nielsen reports are based only on those who watched ESPN's linear channel. Nielsen doesn't track streaming and viewership on ESPN Plus, and ESPN doesn't divulge those sizable portions of viewership totals publicly. That's saying that even more people were watching the top-ranked show on ESPN Plus. I myself watched the fight on ESPN Plus, not the linear network. A clever bit of strategy for those Americans out there who are cutting the cord and deciding they don't want cable, they don't want all those channels because they don't watch all of them. They have the option of subscribing to ESPN Plus. You want to get your boxing fix of top-ranked shows, all you need is ESPN Plus. Well, it's important to note that the PBC is having a very big year, perhaps the biggest year they've ever had commercially since their inception. You will notice that most of the big fights they're putting on, most of the big shows, are happening behind a paywall. Why is that important? Fights like Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Davis or Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr., commercial success that those fights may have yielded. What do they bring the Showtime platform in terms of long-term viewership when you don't actually need to subscribe to Showtime to buy those fights? Say you don't have a Showtime subscription, you ain't got cable, but you still want to see those shows, you can. You can buy those fights by way of pay-per-view.com or Fight TV. It's not necessary to be a long-term Showtime subscriber to take in those box office fights. And what makes that relevant is what Showtime wants, really, what any streaming platform wants, are long-term subscribers, long-term viewers that come in and actually stay, as opposed to what you get from a pay-per-view, a box office fight, which is more of a fire sale. The disparity between the viewing figures for a Garcia versus Davis as opposed to a Rodriguez versus Lopez this past weekend show, that wasn't a pay-per-view, that wasn't a box office fight. More people bought Garcia versus Davis than tuned in to Rodriguez versus Lopez, even though Rodriguez versus Lopez wasn't a pay-per-view. So in theory, why didn't more people watch that fight? Well, the top-ranked card might have had something to do with that. Perhaps. While fights like Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia and Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. may have been box office hits, box office successes, that doesn't herald long-term subscribership, long-term viewership, and that is evident in the numbers for Rodriguez versus Lopez. Because here you have a fight, it's not a pay-per-view, it doesn't cost an arm and a leg, and a lot of people didn't watch it. And if you're Showtime, you want sustained viewership. You want subscribers that subscribe and stay. Ideally, that's what you want in this very unstable climate for everybody, really, not just Showtime. You want eyes on the regular fights, the fights on the regular schedule as well, not just the big pay-per-views. Seems this past weekend, they got beat out by Top Rank, got beat out by a wide margin.
He is. He's going to move up. He told us.
Didn't say that to anybody.
He told us.
He told you. He told you. That's what I'm saying. You just broke news.
You think I shouldn't have said anything?
Probably shouldn't have said that. Nobody.
I already know who he's going to fight.
He's fighting Lomachenko.
Is he really? No.
He's moving up to 135 pounds. He's the WBO champ, and he moves up. If you are the WBO champion, you want to move up in weight, you could challenge for the next title right away, and you have to fight the #1 guy, which is Lomachenko. So we're gonna get Navarrete versus Lomachenko. But no, you broke that. You said that at the weigh-in that he was telling you guys or his team. And
no,
stuff.
Because he was right behind us. You know, they put us in each team, and he was right behind us. And obviously he's always been a cool dude to me, man. In Puerto Rico at the
Word around the campfire seems to be that Emmanuel Navarrete's super featherweight campaign will be short-lived. Just 2 fights into that campaign, he's set to move up to 135 pounds to take on former champion Vasyl Lomachenko. Per a tweet from Michael Benson, Shakur Stevenson versus Vasyl Lomachenko will not be happening next. Bob Arum has revealed. He said Loma wants to take more time off, and so Shakur will fight someone else for the vacant WBC lightweight world title in November. Isaac Cruz and Frank Martin are next up in the rankings. Make it make sense. Didn't I tell you that at 130 pounds, in spite of Emmanuel Navarrete likely being the favorite to beat Joe Cordina, or beat O'Shaquie Foster, or beat Hector Garcia, because all of those champions are on other sides of the street, it's not likely that Emmanuel ends up fighting one of them. It might be more likely that he moves up in weight. Because Top Rank's not going to send him the Matchroom or the PBC, and the PBC and Matchroom aren't going to send Top Rank their champions. That being said, it's entirely possible that Emmanuel ends up moving up in weight. Immediately after the fight, after he beat Oscar Valdez, he welcomed a fight with Shakur Stevenson, and that might happen, perhaps not next, but down the line, after next, because at least according to Robert Garcia, the rumor is Emmanuel's gonna fight Vasyl Lomachenko. It's just a question of when. Hard to imagine that Vasyl Lomachenko, given what happened in his last fight, that he got robbed and everybody knows it. I don't imagine he's on the up and up right now. He's in good spirits. According to Bob, he's gonna take the rest of the year off, then perhaps return to action at some point next year. And at least according to what Robert Garcia is saying, what Robert Garcia was told, Emmanuel is going to move up in weight and fight him, presumably for the newly vacated WBO title. As a WBO super champion, you know, because Emmanuel has already been a WBO champion at 3 weights, and that qualifies him for WBO super champion status. He's WBO champion at 122, 126. He's currently WBO champion at 130, and he can use that special designation to become the mandatory challenger to the WBO title at the next weight, which would put him in line for a fight with Vasyl Lomachenko, because we all know Devin's going to vacate that title sooner or later. He's not going to give Vasyl Lomachenko a rematch, and it's not likely that he moves back down. Moves down to 135. He's supposed to be moving up to 140 in his next fight. Seems a very difficult fight to me for Vasyl Lomachenko, who would be on the rebound off his quote-unquote loss to Devin Haney. Even though Emmanuel Navarrete would be the one moving up in weight, he is the younger, fresher fighter, a durable guy, very durable. Strong. Lungs like nobody's business. He can throw punches in bunches from the opening round to the final round, and he's got punching power that I think would be amplified by moving up in weight again. This isn't like moving up in weight and taking on, say, Shakur Stevenson straight away. A fresh young fighter. At this point, Vasyl Lomachenko is an old war horse. War-torn fighter, gradual decay of time and the wear and tear that comes with it. Emmanuel Navarrete would be a very difficult fight, I think, and what would be a battle of the southpaws for the aging Vasyl Lomachenko. But that's the rumor, and all we can do now is see if it materializes. Up there at super middleweight, Canelo Alvarez had this to say about Jermell. He says Jermell is a better fighter than his brother. He has a better resume, and I feel so inclined to agree. Of all the names attached to a Canelo Alvarez fight, that entire laundry list, Jermell is the only one who actually accomplished anything of substance. Became his division's undisputed champion, took on all the champions at his weight. The 4-weight world champion happily accepted a switch to Jermell Charlo, but Alvarez acknowledged after a press conference Tuesday in Manhattan that he has embraced a more difficult fight against boxing's undisputed junior middleweight champion. Yeah, my thought was Jermall, obviously the most closest to my weight, Alvarez told a group of reporters at the Palladium in Times Square, but you know, they're both the same. I think for me, in my opinion, Jermell is a better fighter than his brother. He has a better resume. He has better opposition. Everything. They may be twin brothers, but they ain't got twin resumes, twin accolades. Jermell Charlo is the first undisputed champion the 4-belt era has seen in the men's junior middleweight division. In that way, he's already made history. He's going to try to again very soon when he takes on Canelo at super middleweight to see if he can't become a 2-weight undisputed champion. I may not like his chances, but I like his ambition. And I like his resume a lot more than I like his brother Jermall's or Demetrius Andrade's. or David Benavidez's for that matter. Suffered a shock upset loss to Tony Harrison and lost its WBC title, subsequently won it back in the rematch in spectacular fashion, knocked out unified champion Jason Rosario, and had two excellent fights with Brian Castano that resulted in him being crowned this division's undisputed champion. This is a better fight for me and my money than the Jermall fight would have been. Though as far as fighting Jermall Charlo, Canelo Alvarez's trainer Eddie Reynoso has now made it clear that Canelo intends to face back-to-back Charlo twins. Jermell Charlo on September 30th, then Jermall Charlo is the next target. After that, it's important to note that Canelo has a 3-fight deal with the PBC. If 2 of those fights are both the Charlo brothers, I'm going to assume that the final fight would be a David Benavidez fight. It would have to be, because Terence Crawford killed any notion, killed any idea that Errol Spence would stand a chance against Canelo. Got annihilated at 147, he'd get pulverized at 168. So I'm going to assume that David Benavidez will be the final fight of Canelo's existing PBC contract. So if it is Canelo's intention to get Jermall Charlo in the ring beyond the Jermell Charlo fight, they've got to get Jermall a tune-up fight. This guy hasn't fought in 2 going on 3 years. Rumor has it that he may end up facing Caleb Plant at some point. Caleb Plant, who's coming right off that loss to David Benavidez. Caleb, who smacked the shit out of Jermall Charlo in the parking lot the weekend of the Crawford versus Spence fight. If they didn't have a reason to make that fight before, they do now. Though given that Jermall hasn't fought in over 2 years and his mental state is questionable, his desire to keep boxing, is that really a safe fight for Jermall Charlo, his first fight at 168? Is it a guarantee he makes it through, Caleb? Not really. You know that Canelo Alvarez wants to fight you if he beats your brother. Are you going to go out there and jeopardize that by fighting somebody else? By fighting Caleb Plant? That's the question. We're in August now, and the summer is all but over. The story was that Jermall was going to return in June. That didn't happen. Clock is ticking. I know of no fight date for Jermall Charlo, tentative or otherwise, that would herald a tune-up fight ahead of what could be a Canelo fight some point next year. None. You have to figure that if Jermall Charlo were to go straight into a Canelo Alvarez fight under these circumstances, he's just showing up for a check. He's cashing out. He's not fighting to win. He's just fighting to keep the lights on. Jermell Charlo, at least these days, is widely regarded as the more ambitious brother of the two and the more capable boxer. So if Canelo makes short work of him, it's safe to say he would do the same thing to his brother. Is there even a point in fighting Jermall Charlo under these circumstances? Is there even a point in fighting Jermall these days? Not really. Not if you're Canelo, anyway. You're already fighting the better brother of the two. But that's the story. He means to beat up both brothers. Both. No, Canelo Alvarez has a long history of beating up guys' brothers. He beat up Ricky Hatton's brother, both the Cotto brothers, and 2 of the Smith brothers. Next, it's the Charlos. Yeah.